two men grabbed my right arm and thrust it up, slit open my wrist, turned my arm over, and started letting my blood drain into one of the silver bowls on the altar. So I signed my name in my own blood. And I had taken a blood oath, made a blood pact with the Klan. I was born in Kokomo, Indiana. I was born in a Ku Klux Klan hospital, which shocks a lot of people when they hear that. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of situation that I was born into, the kind of the ideas that were there. The civil rights movement was just starting in the 1950s. And so I was really, I was a kid in elementary school, primary school in the 60s, high school in the early 70s. So that kind of gives you a time frame. Indiana is in the north, or the northern Midwestern part of the United States, populated with a huge influx of people from the deep South, the old Confederate states, the old slave states. And because of that, they brought a lot of their values with them. And one of those values was segregation. And so I grew up, even up in Kokomo, Indiana, a very segregated society. Kokomo was a city of maybe 50,000 people. There were blacks and there were whites, but there was also a dividing line, an invisible dividing line, but you didn't cross the line. Blacks all lived in one section of the town, whites all lived in another section of the town. My father was not in the Klan. He did not agree with the Klan at all. He didn't agree. He was not a violent man, but he was a segregationist. He believed that the races should be kept separate. I would watch my father. He would be watching the nightly news on television, and he would see the civil rights movement and marches, and he would just say things about the blacks rioting and things like that. And the N-word was a common word in Indiana in the 1960s. And so my father would speak of that, and he would use the N-word. And I gathered that my father did believe that white people were superior to blacks. And frankly, I would say the majority of the white people that I knew, they believed in segregation also. So I grew up in a very segregated town, a very segregated school, and that did not change until I entered 6th grade. The schools were desegregated, and that was the first time I had ever been in a room that I know of with a black child of my age. I'd seen them from a distance, but literally had never been in the room with one. All through elementary school, I was bullied, I was picked on, I was called names, and I didn't make friends very easily. I was not very social. Now it's been determined that I am on the autism spectrum. I was angry. I was an angry child, even though I had a wonderful family life at home, and I loved going to school because I was bright. I loved academics. What I didn't enjoy was being bullied and made fun of and called names all the time. So I grew up very angry. Even in elementary school, I wanted power. That's what I wanted. I wanted to someday, somehow, have power over other people so that I could basically pick on them and get them back for how they had treated me. Well, then 6th grade, my school desegregated. And so now we have African American children, the same age as me, being bused in from the other end of town. And they're displaced. This is not their end of town. I can imagine how they must have felt being bused into a whole different part of town, one that they were not used to going to. And I looked at them and I thought, they're displaced. Maybe I could pick on them. And so I did. And that's what I started doing. And so in middle school, I became known as a racist. My 8th grade yearbook has someone saying to Richard, Grand Dragon of the KKK. And that's what I was known as. I was known as someone who actually could be part of the Klan. I started giving speeches in English class, and my topics were Adolf Hitler, Nazism, the Ku Klux Klan, segregation. Those were my topics. And what I did not know was that there was actually at least one teacher at the school who was a member of the Klan and who took note of me and evidently went back to Klan headquarters and told them, hey, we need to watch this Richard Harris kid. He might be useful to us one of these days.
And as a teenager, was, I guess, being a self-declared racist and a white supremacist, was that socially acceptable in Indiana at the time?
I wouldn't say it was socially acceptable. It was looked down upon, it was frowned upon, but there were an awful lot of people who had the same sentiments. Would I have called myself a white supremacist? I don't think so. I never really thought about it. I wasn't thinking that deeply about any of it, really. It was more a matter of, here's some kids that maybe I could pick on and I could get away with it.
How did you come to be involved with the KKK?
Well, you become a full member of the Klan at age 16. When I turned 16, I had no idea the Klan had been watching me for several years. When I turned 16, the Klan suddenly appeared in my life. And my mother had passed away unexpectedly at the age when I was 14. So she had been dead for 2 years, and my whole family situation changed immediately. And I would come home to a very empty house, a very quiet house. I didn't make friends very easily. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so I was just alone. The Klan knew that, and the Klan realized that they could approach me and woo me in. They appeared in my life, and they started talking and saying things like, hey, Richard, we could, you're like us. We could be your new family. We could take care of you, and no one would ever pick on you or make fun of you again if you joined us, and you believe the same things we do. And that seemed pretty good to a lonely teenager.
Once you'd said, yes, I'd like to be part of this, was there some sort of initiation that you had to take part in?
Yes, there was. On the night that it was going to happen, they picked me up, they blindfolded me, and put me in a car, and they drove and drove and drove. And I soon figured out they were driving around in circles and doing all kinds of things just so I wouldn't know where I was being taken. They finally arrived at a large home. I entered the house and they took the blindfold off. There were probably 100 people there, robes and masks and hoods, a very dark, dimly lit room. But at the end of one end of the room, there was a makeshift altar set up. And there was a man standing behind it. And they marched me down to that altar. Immediately I started noticing some of the things, some of the items on the altar. There was an American flag draped across part of it, a Confederate flag, and there were 2 crossed swords. There were several silver bowls stacked up, and there was a large cross standing, or on the altar, and it was on fire. And I didn't know how they were doing this, but as the ceremony would go on, the man behind the altar, if he raised his voice louder, then the flames of the cross would get higher. And if he lowered it, the flames would go down. I later learned it was fed by propane gas, and he had a foot pedal underneath the altar where he just simply, so depending on how excited he got, the flames were, it was mesmerizing. It was almost like putting you into a trance. I raised my right hand and I repeated after him an oath, several pages long, and I swore allegiance to the United States of America. I swore allegiance and promised to uphold all the laws of the United States of America. I swore allegiance to Jesus Christ. A lot of people don't understand that the Klan believes that they are the true Christians. In all of this, I swear allegiance to all these things. I swore allegiance to white supremacy. I swore allegiance to keep all the rules and the laws of the Ku Klux Klan secret. Then I caught out of the corner of my eye, I caught somebody moving and coming up behind me. There was a man dressed all in black, a black robe, black hood, a black mask, and he was ceremoniously holding, as he came forward, a large hunting knife. And the man behind the altar took that knife and he started warming the blade in the fire of the cross. And I thought, I wonder what he's going to do with that. And I didn't have to wonder very long, because 2 men grabbed my right arm and thrust it up, held it tight, and the blade of that knife came down and slit open my wrist. 52 years ago, I still have the scar, and I still see it. Slit open my wrist, turned my arm over, and started letting my blood drain into one of the silver bowls on the altar. Then they quickly wrapped a bandage, over the wound, and they thrust a quill pen into my hand, and they shoved that multiple page oath that I had just repeated and taken. They shoved it forward, and he said, "Sign." I dipped that quill pen into the bowl, and I signed the oath at the bottom. So I signed my name in my own blood. And I had taken a blood oath, made a blood pact with the Klan. I see that scar literally every day, and every time I do, I'm reminded that I took a blood oath when I joined the Klan. But I never forget it, and I am just thankful that I'm no longer living by that blood oath that I took.
Thank you for sharing that, Richard. Is it under your watch strap there?
Oh, yes. There, yeah. You won't be able to see it, I'm sure, on camera, but the way they made it last so long, and that was the purpose of it, every single day for like the next 3 weeks, I would stop by the state headquarters. They would look at it, and they would rip the scab off and reopen the wound every single day. They reopened it. And at one point, they decided that it was healing too quickly, and so they recut it. And they took the knife and they cut it again. The reason they did that was they knew by doing that it would leave a scar, and they wanted that scar to be on there forever.
And Richard, you were 16 when you joined?
Yes.
So that's incredibly young. How were you feeling?
Right.
Were you scared? Were you excited?
I was not scared. I was excited. And I think part of the excitement was I was 16 years old, and now I am surrounded by all these men, grown men. And the thing that impressed me, I just kept thinking, is I am part of a famous organization now, infamous in reality, but I am part of something that we read about in the history books. And that was just like a validation to me that I was suddenly, I had worth, I had dignity. It gave meaning now to my life that I had really missed most of my life. I was given my first robe that night, and it was a special robe. This was a robe that was often worn in the civil rights marches and rallies and things like that. And he said, it's special because on the bottom of this white robe, you see how it's kind of dirty looking? He said, that's blood stains. He said, this is a special robe. And he said, I want you to have it. I have no idea where the blood came from, don't know anything about it, but I was honored to have that. The robes became kind of like a big part. It's always the costume, always a big part of the theatrics going on in the Klan.
So now, age 16, you're a fully fledged, sworn-in blood oath member of the KKK. What year was this, sorry?
When I joined, it would have been 1974.
So the KKK's activities, what were they doing in Kokomo? What were they doing in Indiana? Were they harassing Black communities? Was there kind of out racism, violence? Was that part of it?
There was some of that, yeah, no doubt. There was some of that. However, the Klan would speak out against black citizens. But the people who were more likely to be targets of the Klan were going to be white people who were friends with Black people, simply because they were easier to get to, because the Black people still lived in a part of the city that most of the Klan members didn't. But some of their white friends did live there. So it was usually a matter of what is convenience, what is the easiest target we can get. The violence was definitely there, but it was toned down a lot more than what it had been. Most of the people who were my advisors training me in the Klan Most of those people they were older, and they had been part of the very violent 1960s Klan. Many of them had gone to jail. They didn't want to go to jail anymore, and they said, we're not accomplishing anything by going to jail. We need to do some other things besides just violence. They started what they called psychological terrorism, intimidation, following people around, leaving calling cards, Klan calling cards, places where they would find them. Things like that you weren't going to go to jail for back in those days. We would call it stalking now, but no one paid any attention to it back then. And so it was safe, but it still brought harm to people.
So kind of fear and intimidation tactics.
Fear, intimidation, yes.
Is it true that those kind of calling cards would say things like the KKK is watching you?
Oh, absolutely. We had stickers that said the KKK is watching you, that we would put on the car windows. We would put it right on their windshield. The Klan has paid you a friendly visit. Would you like us to pay you a non-friendly visit? Things like that.
That's terrifying. Mm-hmm. I guess when you were part of all of this, did you ever question the beliefs? Did you ever have any doubts, or were you fully sold in at this point?
I was pretty much fully sold. If you understand how radicalization works, you're radicalized in steps or stages. And by the time you have come this far, then the next stage makes sense, because your mind is saying, okay, I agree with this. So that's how you're kind of radicalized. Did I ever question it? Yes, I did. Yeah, I questioned it sometimes. What I didn't know was that they had plans for me. They were already looking at me as a possible candidate for Grand Dragon. And they started immediately grooming me for leadership. They didn't tell me that that's what they were doing, but that is what they were doing. They were grooming me for leadership. What was happening in the Klan at that time was the Klan down in Louisiana was run by a man named David Dukes. David was college age at that time, clean cut, intelligent, articulate, and he was doing a great job of building up the Klan in Louisiana. They called it the New Klan, where David Dukes would rarely appear in public in the robe and hood and mask, but instead he would appear in a suit, business suit and tie. This was not the stereotypical KKK member. Indiana said, we want a Grand Dragon like that. We need a young Grand Dragon, very intelligent, articulate. We need a David Dukes. And they were looking at me and seeing, maybe this could be our David Dukes.
So they were, from the moment you were sworn in, this was the path for you.
But they didn't tell me that. I had no clue. Why would I even think that they were grooming me to be the Grand Dragon of the entire state? So I did not know. I did not know until they actually announced that I was the new Grand Dragon. They had called a special meeting for all of the Klansmen who were able to come in Kokomo, Indiana, and I was there. I had no idea what was going to be announced, but I could tell that there was something. It was a big announcement. It was going to be something special. Indiana had not had a Grand Dragon for a couple of years. As long as I'd been in the Klan, I'd been asking for 2 years, when is Indiana going to get a Grand Dragon? Why don't we have a Grand Dragon? And they would never answer me. They would never give me a straight answer. And so I thought, maybe this special meeting, specially called meeting, I wonder if they're going to announce who the Grand Dragon is, that we have one now. As the meeting started, the Great Titan went on and was saying things like, that I could tell he was going to announce the Grand Dragon. It's like, who is it? And then he announced my name, and I was floored, really. I was like, what? But I remember standing up after they were applauding and everything. I stood up and I made a little speech, and I accepted the Grand Dragonship. And that's how I became the Grand Dragon.
So for you in that moment, what did that mean? What did that role entail?
The Grand Dragon is like the figurehead, the spokesperson. The Grand Dragon is the one who speaks at the rallies and conducts the marches, basically does all the ceremonial type things on the state level. And so that was what I was going to have to learn and be trained for. I could already give a speech. They'd heard me speak many times, and they liked what they heard. I could rally the troops, and that's what the Grand Dragon does. So my life over the next 2 years was mostly traveling around, giving speeches. They had learned a lot from the mistakes they made in the 1960s. Some of the Klan leaders, the Dragons, had actually been put in jail because they were convicted of violence and crimes that they had perpetuated. And they learned that they didn't want that of their leadership anymore. So what they did was they devised some rules that basically kept me in the dark when it came to any kind of violence the Klan was planning. No one was allowed to ever talk about anything violent or illegal if I was in the room.
Were you happy in the role as Grand Dragon?
In some ways, I was happy because I had importance. I felt powerful. People respected me. But in many ways, I wasn't. I would often be crying myself to sleep at night. I realized that I had ruined my life. I realized that I was probably not going to live a long life. And I realized how much most people hated and despised me because of who I was. So was there happiness? Yeah, a little. Was there unhappiness? Yeah, a lot. Because I realized I felt like I was trapped. I had trapped myself into this. There was no getting out. There was no leaving. I didn't know what to do. And then I got word that one of my own security guards had put a hit out on me, and he was going to get me killed. I didn't know what to do. And in my 20-year-old mind at that time, all I could think of was, I need better security. And I knew that the only way I was going to get better security was if I was a national officer. So I called the Imperial Wizard and I said, I think I'm ready for a national office. He was my friend. He liked me. He said, the only national office that I have coming open is that of national chaplain. I said, I don't know anything about being a preacher. And he said, that's all right. You start reading the Bible, putting some good sounding scripture verses in your speeches, start sounding religious, and I'll take care of the rest. Well, that sounded like a plan to me. So that night, I began reading my Bible. I believe now that God was guiding me and directing me, because I started with the perfect place, the Gospel according to John. I started reading that, and I immediately thought, oh, this is great. These are the stories of Jesus. I will quote Jesus. You can't sound any more religious than that. I got to John chapter 4, and that's when the light bulb came on. It's the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. The Samaritan was half Jewish, half Gentile, or as the Klan liked to say, a race mixer. There is absolutely nothing the Klan hates worse than race mixers. So I'm reading down and I'm recognizing, oh, this is one of the favorites of the Klan chaplains. I know this story because the Klan has told me so many times this story. And if you know the story at all, you know that Jesus stops by this well. The Samaritan woman comes to draw water from the well, and Jesus asks the Samaritan woman, please give me a drink. And the Samaritan woman says, why are you, a Jew, asking me, a Samaritan, for a drink? And then the Bible says, for Jews do not associate with Samaritans. And at that, the Klan chaplain would slam his Bible shut, because that was the Samaritan woman at the well story. The only thing is, I'm reading it for myself now, and I realize that's not where the story ended. And I keep reading, and this Samaritan woman became a believer in Jesus. Jesus accepted her. The whole point of the Samaritan woman at the well story was Jesus accepted Samaritans, race mixers, and he loved them, and they believed in him. That's when the light bulb went on. The Klan has been lying to me. They've been twisting the scriptures. And so at the end of that night, I prayed. I didn't know how to pray, but I prayed something like, God, if there's any way you can get me out of this alive, I want out, and I want to know what a real Christian is. And I want to be a real Christian. And the next day, I called the Imperial Wizard and I quit. Well, it's not that easy to quit when you're the Grand Dragon. But after some negotiation, a couple days of negotiations, it finally ended with they put a gun to my head and they said, we're going to let you out, we're going to let you live if you keep your mouth shut. And I agreed. And I was out. And I kept my mouth shut for 15 years. And then I started speaking out against the Klan and racism and white supremacy.
And those 15 years before you decided to start speaking out, what did they look like for you? What were you spending your time doing? Did you stay in Indiana?
I did stay in Indiana, a few years in Illinois, but I went to college and I became a pastor. Studied the ministry, got a master's degree in Christian ministry, and I was a senior pastor for 31 years.
And your interactions with Black and African American people, what did those look like initially for you?
Sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to heal myself. Did I have anything to do with African Americans? Yes. I realized that African Americans and everyone else, every human being, is made in the image of God, and they have an inherent dignity about them, worth and value. And so I started treating people like that the best that I knew how. Once I started going out and speaking publicly, it was not good. And it was more my fault than anyone else's because I didn't present my story very well. I was learning how to present it, how to talk about it, and I wasn't doing a good job. I was very offensive to a lot of people, and they let me know that. And at some points, I almost decided that I won't speak out any longer because it's not doing any good. But then every once in a while, someone would come and say, I really needed that. That helped me. I'm struggling with bias and racism in my own life, and you're helping me. And so that's what kept me going. And eventually, I learned to speak about it so that everyone in the room didn't get mad at me all at once, and people actually started responding positively to the way I was speaking out about the Klan.
Did you ever experience any negativity from the Klan itself when you started to speak out?
Yes, I've survived 3 assassination attempts. They have watched me. I realized that back when we had landline phones, before cellular, I knew that they tapped my phones all the time. They knew where I was, and they did everything they could to intimidate me and to get me to shut up.
Why do you think that people fall into extremist ideologies or groups like the KKK? Is it always to do with similar things that you were going through, or is it broader than that?
I think a lot of times it is very similar to what I was experiencing. The loneliness, the feeling like you don't really belong, the lack of dignity, the lack of the idea that does your life have meaning? These are the longings. They're universal, and it's what makes people vulnerable to groups like the Klan that can come in and they can say, you can belong with us because we'll be your family and we'll be your friends, and We'll provide meaning for you, and we will provide dignity for you. We will respect you. And that, yeah, I think that's what an awful lot of it is.
And my final question for you, Richard, is just what does your life look like now?
Well, it looks completely different than what it did when I was 20 years old, that's for sure. I became a senior pastor, pastored for 31 years, and during the last probably 20 years, 25 years of that, I also started teaching on the university level, earned a doctorate in adult higher education. Today, I'm an associate pastor of an African American church, a historic African American church, and my congregation is almost entirely black. I've been there 12 years. Now, the thing about the African American church that invited me to join is I'm the first white pastor the church has ever had in its history. And it was started about 140 years ago. And they have accepted me, they have forgiven me, they love me, and I love them. And it has been the best church family that I've ever found. So I get to minister to the people that I once would not have even spoken to. And it's wonderful. So my life is very different. My life is very full of diverse people. And I believe that that's the way God intended for it to be. I feel like I have a full life now, and I feel like I have found where I belong. I feel that I stand as a testimony to the fact that you don't have to be racist and biased against other people.
When you are part of the neo-Nazi movement and you stand up in the morning when you drink your first tea and you hate all day, and you listen to music and you hang around with comrades who all hate is just part of your life every second.